Welcome to Skip the Queue, a podcast for people working in or working with visitor attractions. I'm your host, Kelly Molson. In this new monthly slot, Cheese CEO Paul Marden joins me to discuss different digital-related topics. In this episode, we'll talk about how you can make your site more interactive and the tasks and costs associated with that. You can subscribe on all the usual channels by searching Skip the Queue. Hello, back for a fourth time.
Hello.
What attraction have you visited most recently and what did you love about it?
Shall I go first? I always go first.
I like it. I like
feels a bit
We've got
odd.
a format now. Don't break the format. I'm comfortable.
I went to the Titanic Museum just recently. We were exhibiting actually at the Association of Science and Discovery Centres at their annual conference in Belfast, which was actually at W5. In the Titanic Quarter of Belfast, and I could talk loads about W5, which I will do in another session. But the place that I went to that I was most kind of emotionally moved by, which I'm a bit of a geek and I'm fairly concrete in terms of my emotional stuff.
You're a bit
so for me to feel
cold.
moved,
It's normally me that's got the flubbing.
Yeah, so I was blown away by the experience at the Titanic Museum. I've never been to a museum with so few artifacts, which of course is because everything was lost at sea, and so the whole museum is about telling the story through reproductions and immersive experiences, which was all amazing. But then you stumble upon one of the original artifacts as you're wandering around, and there's only a handful of them, but it hit me like a brick wall when I actually came across them. So there's a life jacket. There's only 12 of those left in existence.
Oh, wow.
And they've got one of them at the museum. And you walk into this room where all of the names of the victims of this tragedy are on this massive wall. And it's a darkened room, but lit in the center of the room was this one life jacket. Amazing. And then you walk around and there's a section talking about the root cause of the accident, and there are the keys to the binocular store from the crow's nest, which happened to be in the second officer's pocket, and he had to get off the ship in Southampton and he didn't get back on, and so there were no keys, and so the people that were in the crow's nest couldn't open the box with the binoculars that would have led them to see the iceberg.
Wow, what a story. That wasn't in the film.
And it was really, no, it wasn't in the film. So it's really impactful. And then the storytelling was amazing, but completely lost on me. So I made a new friend, Lucinda Lewis, the CEO of Catalyst Science and Discovery Centre. And we were like both saying how amazing it was, how impactful it was. And she was like, and the dominoes. And I'm like, dominoes? What dominoes? And she was like, did you not see when you were looking at all of the root causes, they wrote them on these big pillars that were toppling, showing you the domino effect. I was like, okay, yeah, no, that was completely lost on me.
So lesson for you is you need to pay more attention to the interpretation next time.
Completely clueless to the subtext of what was going on around me, but the story was amazing.
The story's really cool. Yeah, I've never heard that before. That's really impressive. I think that picture that you painted of all the names with the one kind of life jacket in the middle of it is so powerful. I can see it in my head, but yeah. I've never seen it.
And that was only one of a dozen kind of really powerful memories that I've got of being just blown away by their storytelling and how they communicated what happened. It was just an amazing place.
Nice. I'm glad I missed that. I couldn't make it to the conference this year because I was elsewhere.
Absolutely. What have you been doing recently? Where have you been?
But this is a very, very recent one. Literally last Thursday, I was very kindly invited to go and visit the Ashmolean Museum, which is a free to enter museum. But what I really liked is they have a very large donations area as you first walk in, and you've got card donations. Beep. So easy. I never have cash, so that was a big thumbs up for me. The museum is brilliant. I mean, it has some brilliant exhibitions in it that are there, they're always there. But I was really keen to go and see their Colour Revolution exhibition, which is all around Victorian art, fashion and design. Some of you might not know this about me, but I was a graphic designer in the past. Probably loads of you people know about that. I've talked about that loads. I was a graphic designer once upon a time, and I was a packaging designer, and just design and color, and also I've got a real passion for kind of interior design as well. So all of these things I've a big love of, and this exhibition for me was like, this is the one. This is a big tick. What I found really fascinating is that Victorian Britain has this kind of connotation of being really dull and dreary, and the exhibition was kind of exploring that it's absolutely incorrect. But they start with Queen Victoria's mourning dress, which is a really powerful image. So after Prince Albert's sudden death, she plunged into a very, very deep grief, and she actually wore, I didn't know this, she wore black for the remaining 40 years of her life. I had no idea that I knew she mourned for a really long time. I had no idea she never wore another color again. So that she's obviously such an iconic image, an iconic person of that era, that image probably sticks with you, which is why it adds to that illusion of Victorians loving the dark.
Completely.
But they didn't. They really loved to colour, and they loved to experiment with it. And they have a big thing about kind of insects and animals and bringing that into like the colours that they wore, and the jewellery. Like some of the jewellery, like this beetle necklace was it's incredible. And there is a lot of, I know that they have a lot of that in their kind of fabrics and their kind of artwork from that time as well. But what I really loved is really small artifact in the museum that I totally loved. So it was a very early colour chart, like a paint sample colour chart. So this is quite current for me at the minute. You can't, I'm just going to pull this down. If you're watching, you can see behind me, my office is full of furnishings because we're renovating a cottage in Norfolk, and it's not ready, but I've had to order all the things for it or find them off Facebook Marketplace and eBay and charity shops and vintage places, and my office is full of it. So colour charts and all of that kind of stuff is like right up here at the moment. But anyway, there was an 1814 Scottish artist called Patrick Soame, and he tried to solve the problem of how to describe colour by giving each one of them a name. But he drew on nature to do this. So you have like mole's breath now from Sparrow and Ball, and lichen green and those kind of stuff. Well, this is where this started in the Victorian age. So it's absolutely beautiful. I posted it on my LinkedIn. But this color chart is just gorgeous, and it gives a number for each color. So number 54, its name was duck green. The animal that it was named after is the neck of mallard. I actually thought the color was neck of mallard, which I was like, that's absolutely brilliant. The vegetable that it is similar to is the upper disc of yew leaves, and the mineral is I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this, selenite. And I googled it. It is green. I had no idea what selenite is, but it's
I would struggle to. I'd struggle to identify a yew tree, let alone the upper disc green of a yew tree's leaf. Is a no.
Well, there you go. Genuinely, honestly, I loved it. I loved every minute of it. It was really interesting, and that for me was like, I know it's a really small artifact, but it was the standout one for me because it just connected with something that is so current for me at the moment. And it was £15 to go and see this exhibition, and that is money well spent. It's open now until the 18th of Feb 2024, so totally get yourselves along to visit that. And also their restaurant and food is top notch.
Was it good? Was it
really good?
Okay.
Yeah. We'll talk about that another time.
We've done a few of the Oxford Uni museums, but we've not done the Ashmolean yet, so that needs to be on my list of places to go.
Yeah, definitely worth a little visit. Okay, right, we're going to talk about interactivity today. Making your website more interactive can improve engagement, which is more likely to improve your conversion rate. but very few attractions have interactive elements, which is quite surprising, actually.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about how you can make your site a bit more interactive and immersive. So the stat from the survey is that 53% of visitor attractions surveyed don't have any interactive elements on their websites. So that's like, I'm quite surprised about that, because we went, during the pandemic, we went all in on interactivity. We had to. It was the only way that you could, kind of get people to your site and get people engaged in what you were doing. And we're talking about things like virtual tours, interactive maps, or even just integrating video and audio on your site is a way of making it interactive as well. So yeah, I was quite surprised that it was so low, actually.
Yeah, it surprised me as well, because a lot of the people that we talk to want that kind of interactive content added into their sites. So yeah.
Do you think, and I'm not trying to make us idiots here again, because we did enough of that on the last episode, but do you think that people understand that video and audio is an interactive element?
That's a good point.
Or is our expectation of it to be more? So like, do we, because audio and video, do we see that as a standard thing now? We don't see that as a special element.
That could be absolutely true. And we talked a lot last week about things that we could do to improve the survey for next time. There's a real risk, isn't there? Because you could ask a lot more very detailed questions. Do you have a virtual tour? Do you have an interactive map? Do you have video and audio on your site? And now all of a sudden we've gone from one question to 3 questions, and we're asking too much of everybody when they fill stuff in. Sure. So you end up having to have broader questions, but those broader questions themselves become a little ambiguous. So maybe there's an element of, it could be that there's a bunch of people in the outside of that 53% there's a bunch of people in that 53% of people that don't have interactivity that may have stuff that is, video or audio that we would consider to be interactive, but they don't.
Do you think as well that because life has gone back to relative normality for the majority of us, that we just are not engaging with those things as much, or they just not seem to be as relevant anymore?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? We talked this week about audience personas and trying to personalize the site to give people exactly the content that's relevant to them. Who is the target audience for the virtual tour? Is the target audience for a virtual tour the people that are going to come visit? Is it a way of enticing people to come and physically come on site? Is it a way of extending the reach of the attraction? Or let's say it's a cultural or museum kind of setting. Is it a way for them to extend the reach of their collection to people that can't come? Understanding what the interactivity is there for and how it enables the audience to achieve the goal that they're trying to achieve, and for the client, the attraction themselves, to be able to achieve what their goal is for that audience group is interesting. Interactivity for its own sake doesn't help anyone if you've not really thought about why you're putting it there.
Yeah, I was just trying to think. I've got a good case study of this, and I've forgotten the name of the place, and I want to talk about it, but I've forgotten the name of it. So I'll give you an explanation of it instead. So years ago, oh god, I think this is in 2015. Lee and I went to Australia on holiday. Lee actually asked me to marry him in Australia at Ayers Rock. It was very romantic.
Oh, wow.
But one of the best, I should say, that was the best trip. Obviously, that was the best trip.
Of course.
But one of the other best trips that we went on while we were there was when we were in Melbourne. We went to I've got the island, and I've forgotten the name of the island. It's come totally out of my head. But we went to see the little penguins. So the penguin parade that comes in. These penguins come in to shore every night, and you can go and watch them come in. It's like an army of miniature penguins, and it genuinely is the most magical thing I've ever seen in my whole life. And you can't take photos because it hurts their eyes. So you are literally you're immersing yourself into this experience.
Yeah.
And it's all up here in my head. Well, during the pandemic, they started live broadcasting it on Facebook, and I was like, shut up, this is amazing, because it's an expensive trip back to Australia, but I'd love to go
Yeah,
and do that again. Jen would absolutely 100% go back and do that again. But this was like a magic opportunity to sit in my home office and watch it as well. So those kind of opportunities, I think, are pretty magical.
you reminded me of in the middle of lockdown, I was obsessed by watching the webcam at Monterey Bay Aquarium. Um, what?
I just this got something else I got obsessed about a few weeks ago, which was I watched the webcam. Sandringham have got, no, is it Sandringham or Balmoral? One of them have got a webcam with the red squirrels. I think it's Balmoral. And I got absolutely like totally obsessed with it. I had it on in the corner of the screen just while I was working, just going, is it there yet? Is it back here? Red squirrel, red squirrel. You
I
don't
think it
see
might
them
be a
very
day
often.
when
Sorry.
the two of us were looking at penguins and sea otters during the height of the pandemic when we were desperate to travel. Now, watching red squirrels on a webcam might not have the same justification for the
It's
rest of
really
your day's work.
it's really cool. It's really cool. You don't get to see red squirrels very often, so
No, you don't.
anyway,
None
apologies. I
down here.
just went off on a total tangent
Yeah,
then.
we
But you
did.
can see, look, like we've got really animated about this, so you can totally see the value of having those kind of experiences on your website and
Totally.
being it to engage with different audiences. So
Shall we do a stat? Shall we talk about some
yeah,
numbers?
yeah. What's the benefits?
Yeah. So HubSpot, again, we talk about HubSpot data all the time, but HubSpot found that interactive content like quizzes, assessments, and polls can increase time spent on a website by 80%. That one's lifted straight out of the survey that we put into there. But there's some more. There's the Content Marketing Institute shows that 81% of marketers agreed that interactive content grabbed more attention than static content. So, but that chimes with the data that we gathered from people, doesn't it? Because a lot of people do think that this is important stuff. Maybe not quite to the same level that the Content Marketing Institute found, but obviously people in the results set from our survey thought that this was important.
Yeah, and I think it depends on what that interactive content is. So interestingly, when we did the live webinar for the report, we had someone on the webinar mention that they were a bit worried about distraction. So, we talk a lot about, focusing people's attention on the job in hand, which is ultimately showcase what your attraction does, get them to buy a ticket. And this person said, are we distracting them from those journeys by doing that? But I don't know if it's part of the purchase journey. I think it might be post-purchase. It feels for me like post-purchase, getting them to come back and engage in your site, repeat visit stuff, that just those things around quizzes and assessment and polls and stuff like that. And also, this example that I just gave about the little penguins, I absolutely will go back to that place one day, and being able to engage with it keeps it front and center of my mind to go, when we go back to Australia, I'm going to take my kid to see that because she will love it. I'll make sure she loves it, and I think, I don't know if it's part of the first point of engagement. I think it's post-purchase engagement.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Anyway,
what are the problems though?
Problems. Sustainability.
Yeah. Shall I share a bugbear of mine that I share regularly in meetings all the time? But a lot of interactive content, especially the stuff that uses video, can be inherently unsustainable. Video uses bandwidth, and a lot of people don't think of websites and the impact that websites can have on CO2 emissions. Yeah, it's a link that I don't think many people make. I certainly didn't until, there's been a lot of talk around in our industry about this in the last couple of years, and it's really opened my eyes up. It's easy to understand. If you work for an airline, you can see the CO2 emissions coming out the back of the plane, but if you build websites, you don't see it necessarily. But video consumes bandwidth, and bandwidth takes all of these things, the compute power to produce the video and publish it out onto the internet, and then to shift all of that data across the internet, ultimately uses energy, and that energy comes at the cost of producing CO2. One of the obvious ways, if we're just talking about video itself, because video is one kind of more interactive element, avoiding auto-playing videos, which is my absolute bugbear. When you land on a homepage of a website and the video auto-plays, that for me, now that my eyes have been opened to the impact of it, I only used to see the conversion rate benefit, but now the cost associated with that is clear in my mind, and I think if we can avoid doing that and find other ways to increase conversion, I think that's really important. But also doing things to make sure that we understand what the sustainability impact of the web pages that we produce. So as we make our web pages more complex, they will produce more CO2 as a result of doing that. And I think as people become more aware of this, the world is going to change. At the moment, the people that buy from us, this is not something that is front and center of their minds in the buying process, I think, at the moment. And there's a lot of power in the hands of the marketers and the procurement people to make it so that technical people like us that build things are required to take that sustainability kind of perspective into account when we're building things and making sure that we build things sustainably.
And then there's accessibility. So interactive elements can be really great for people that can't visit your site, for one example. However, the digital aspect of that means that you could intentionally put something on your site which actually is less accessible for people who have visual impairments or hearing impairments, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got video with audio, have you got subtitles? If you've got video, do you have audio descriptions that describe what the video is showing? If you've got an interactive map, how would you provide a more accessible way of being able to see the interactive map? If you've got a 3D interactive immersive virtual tour, how will you interact with that if you can't see it to interact with it? Those are all things that people need to be thinking about, and many of the institutions that we work with, will have a statutory obligation to think about it as well. It's not just a nice to have, it's a statutory obligation to do it as well.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so who's doing it well? I think we should just caveat this one by saying that these sometimes so our report and a survey and subsequent report are all anonymous. If we ever share anyone's information that is in relation to the report data, we have asked for their express permission prior to this, prior to sharing. In this instant, we've just gone out and found some stuff on people's websites and gone, we really like this. This is really cool. So we're not talking about these institutions in relation to survey data.
No, absolutely. Should we talk about the first one in our list? Was Mary Rose Trust, and the Mary Rose Museum has got an amazing array of interactive artifacts that they've lifted off the bottom of the seabed and made it available on the website, so you can't, I was going to say you can pick it up, but you can
with your mouse you can turn it around. Not with your hand.
Yeah, not yet. The technology isn't quite there yet. But yeah, you can interact with those artifacts, and I think that's pretty amazing for an organization like them to be able to share those, because they've got an amazing collection of Tudor artifacts, and to be able to share those with the outside world is really impressive.
Yeah, so that's like simple technology where you can kind of 3D model the artifact, and you can spin it around, and you can click on elements of it that will tell you a little bit about this part of it, or where it was found, or the condition of it, etc., etc. So that is super cool. What was the other one on this list that you were like, this is great?
I really loved the Museum of London's Victorian Walk. So it's like it's a 3D tour affair. And obviously they've scanned, taken photos and composed this together into this really cool 3D tour system that you can just move around and experience what life is like on a Victorian walk. I was blown away by You were talking about the colour of Victorian England. Yeah, it was a really colourful experience. So in my mind, it was a bit like going into Diagon Alley in Hogwarts in the Harry Potter world. It felt that kind of side street of London kind of thing, but you really got into it. It was very cool.
Oh, that's one for me. So I should go and do that and do a little comparison of how colourful it was based on my
Yeah,
Ashmolean experience.
absolutely.
Cool. Okay. Next steps that someone can take if they're thinking about stuff like this. So assess what you can do really quickly and easily. So
Yeah, I think a
you
lot of
already
people
have.
Yeah, a lot of people are already going to have stuff, aren't they? So, what video have they got? What audio have they got? Were they like Mary Rose and had a bunch of 3D scans of their artifacts that then you can stick into a tool and put onto your website? Obviously, if you've got a large collection and you want to 3D scan everything and put it onto your website, that's not a trivial undertaking, is it? But if
No.
you've already got the 3D scans of stuff and you need to then make it available on the website, then the step might be relatively much simpler than scanning your whole collection.
Yeah. So have a look through, your video, your audio, your 3D elements. What do you already have? What can you make more of? And then what can you easily add to your current site?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of websites can add video and audio just straight out of the box. Yeah, I'm going to get a bit geeky and talk about iframes, but essentially an iframe is a little cutout area of your website that you can post a little bit of content into, that a lot of different interactive tools on the web will allow you to do. So the 3D art, 3D models. There's a tool that you can create 3D models of the world in, that we've used on a number of different projects, and then you just embed it as an iframe, which is essentially take a URL of your 3D scan and you pop it into your website and it comes out and works on the page as is. It's pretty awesome and takes so little effort for your developers to be able to add it to the site.
Cool. And then think about what you could commission, or think about some of the things that you could potentially look at as a larger piece of project work.
Yeah, I mean, there's a brainstorming exercise there, isn't there, of trying to get lots of people together and come up with creative ideas and think about what you can do. Some of the other stuff that we've talked about, easy, doesn't take a lot of effort. You've got the assets already, or it's relatively easy to add them to your site. But what else could you do that takes a lot of effort
Ask
and planning?
your visitors. ask people what more they'd like to see.
Yeah, figuring out what your audience wants and how do you get them to that is step number one, isn't it?
Okay, and then what kind of budget are we looking at for some of these things?
How long's a piece of string kind of question, this one, isn't it? It's really, really hard. Adding interactive maps onto your site that are fully accessible and easy to use. I guess you're looking at a few £1,000s to be able to do that. Potentially less, depends on what you want to put into your interactive map. Video and audio, if your website already supports it and you've got a whole library of this stuff that you want to share with the outside world, it could cost you nothing but the time it takes you to add it to the site. And then you get into some of the more complex elements, like you can imagine that creating a 3D kind of immersive virtual walkthrough, that's not a trivial job. That if you want to go and photograph an entire exhibit, walk around the whole floor plan of your museum and create an amazing virtual tour of that's going to take some effort, both in terms of getting the right people to turn up with the right kit to be able to do that photography, and then in terms of the technology that's needed to turn that into a virtual tour, and then the effort to embed that into the website itself. Could be amazing. Probably not a cheap exercise.
No, substantial investment, and you just need to make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons and for the right audience as well. Also, podcast. If you are thinking about doing a podcast for your museum or your attraction, which I think is a genius idea, give us a shout and we'd be happy to share some of our kind of top tips. I think we did an episode on it back in the day with Paul Griffith from Paynes Hill Park, who actually, he interviewed me on this podcast, and we talked about some of the reasons that we did it, how we set it up, and some of the kind of costings around that as well. So it's worth having a little bit dig through the archives. But if you've got any questions on that, then yeah, give us a shout. Thank you. Good chat again today. I enjoyed this.
Been good, hasn't it?
Yeah, I'll see you next time.
Thank you. Cheers, mate. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to Skip the Queue. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find us. And remember to follow us on Twitter for your chance to win the books that have been mentioned. Skip the Queue is brought to you by Rubber Cheese, a digital agency that builds remarkable systems and websites for attractions that helps them increase their visitor numbers. You can find show notes and transcriptions from this episode and more over on our website, rubbercheese.com/podcast.